Hey, I'm ZSHPlays. Welcome back to the Alpine Mountain Zoo. It's looking very chilly in the zoo today, and we're going to be heading into the Himalayan Pass to build a habitat for red pandas with an overpass so that the pandas can walk over the guest path and into their little house. Let's go! Building an overpass for animals is something that people often struggle with in Planet Zoo, but it's actually pretty simple as long as you know the trick to get it to work. The trick is that little log that you see there. You just need a climbable item at the bottom of whatever little kind of tunnel you're going to be making for them. And that will ensure that instead of being affected by the animal's massive hitboxes and not being able to get into whatever you're building, they will use their climbing hitboxes, which are much smaller, and they'll be able to fit through it. So we're going to build a pretty small little mesh tunnel for our red pandas to climb through, and we'll just have a climbable piece at the bottom to make sure that it works. I'm going to switch the piece of wood that you see there out for a rope later on, just because it's a bit smaller and it looks a bit better, but we'll start with this for now. We're just going to curve the mesh pieces around the log at the bottom to form a little tunnel for them that will go in the air from the middle of their habitat onto the building that you can see behind it here, which is where their little indoor spot is going to be. We don't need a huge indoor spot for the red panda. Living in the mountains of China, they're going to be very used to the kind of weather that we would get at the Alpine Mountain Zoo, so don't need a huge indoor space. They won't be spending much time in there. And then we're going to use the LED pieces from the Asia Animal Pack to create a surround for it. I'm modelling this on an overpass that I saw at Paradisa a couple of months ago. They use it for the golden snub-nosed monkeys that they have there, and I'm assuming that it works via tension, so there's no visible supports for the overpass. It's got a beginning at one end of the habitat and an end in the middle of the habitat, and it's all just suspended in midair. I'm assuming the supports every couple of meters in the tunnel are held with tension along with the wire, so it doesn't actually need supports, which is really useful because that means we can run it straight over this guest path, and the guests will be able to walk underneath the red panda as it climbs above them. The most important thing with getting these to work is to make sure that this climbable piece is above the building pieces that you're using so the animals will be able to climb on it. Normally you just have to fiddle around with it a lot with an animal in the habitat and use the heat map to make sure it works. Sometimes it can take forever to get it to work. I remember building one for raccoons that took me about half a day, and then sometimes it just works straight away. It depends on exactly where you've put the pieces. There's no real science to it, I don't think. You just need to make sure that on the heat map, all the green lines are joined together from the ground up to the tunnel, into the tunnel, and then out of the tunnel at the other side, and your animals should be able to use it fine. That's the basics of the tunnel done. We've just knocked through that wall there in this building so we get it into where their indoor house is going to be. We'll copy it down the roof of the building, and now we can get on to building the habitat itself. I want the habitat to look really natural so that we've got the effect of all the temple buildings on the left, and then on the right a wall, some grass, and then rocks and vegetation. Like that's the end of this cliff, and it's just going to drop off after that. So we're going to use the wall that we already created for this temple so everything matches up nicely. We'll just line that along all the terrain changes here, and then we'll get our giant pile of rocks and use that to create the back of the habitat. We'll make some changes to it, get it looking really natural, kind of like a cliff edge. We'll move all these small aquatic faux rocks down to get a little rock pile here, like some rocks have fallen down. And we'll make the top of it nice and flat. We're going to have a simple concrete wall at the top here that will keep the pandas in, that will effectively be invisible to the guests because it's going to be completely covered in foliage. This part of the habitat is heavily inspired by the red panda habitat at Prague Zoo, which is really cute. The most active red pandas I've ever seen, I think, in that habitat. And like this, it's really natural looking. You have to look really hard to see the back walls and all the things that are keeping the pandas in there. It just looks like the side of a rock face. Loads of plants and trees for them to climb on, loads of rocks for them to climb on. The panda that I saw in there certainly looked like they were having a lot of fun, and I think ours will as well. As we copy these pieces, simply by changing the angle on both axes, we can make it look really natural, and we'll just join it on to this wall here. And then we're going to start putting some soil in using a mixture of the actual terrain and some mulch pieces so that we can start getting foliage in here. So we get the effect that the foliage is going up the side of the cliff face until it ends, and make sure that the concrete wall that we put in a minute can't be seen. We're mainly using the arrangement of Alpine style foliage that we've used throughout the zoo. We've got some big pines in here that the red pandas are going to be able to climb on, and we're going to put a few of our autumnal orange trees in here as well. So we've got a different look when winter really hits and they lose their leaves. We're also going to use some beech trees sunk down into the rocks to look like bushes. These work really nicely if you use loads of them. Just looks like mounds of vegetation rather than an individual tree or bush. And that enables us to cover loads of this really quickly and really effectively. And then we can get the concrete wall in. No need to do any major detailing on this because it is going to be practically invisible. We're literally just going to use one concrete wall piece and then copy this around the back of the habitat and follow the curves of the rocks that we've got in here. And we'll do a little bit of tidying up on the ends of it that might be visible so that it looks good. These parts here really don't need much work. Possibly the simplest wall we've ever built, but there's no point spending time making a beautiful, elaborate wall if it's not going to be visible. And this is why we don't need to do much work to it. It'll be completely covered up with all these beech trees and a few other bits of vegetation. So from the guest perspective, it'll just be invisible. Once we've done that, we can start raising the terrain to meet these rocks at the back of the habitat, so the whole thing is on a slope. Loving all the terrain changes in this zoo. Never done anything with this much terrain changes in it before. It's a lot of work. Sometimes even the really basic stuff you see in the habitats, and especially in the buildings, takes a lot longer than it would do normally because everything has to be put at a custom angle. It's so much easier to build when everything's flat, especially with the grid system in the game, but much like individually placing these mulch pieces, it's really worth it at the end. If we take a look at what we've got here now, even with the fairly small amount of work that we've done so far, it's looking really good. Let's move on and start getting the ditch in that's going to keep these pandas contained. We need a depth of 2 meters to keep the red pandas in here, so we'll dig down to there and then run this ditch along the level of the wall. And then because we need a gap between the path and the ditch to be able to work with the terrain, we'll fill in that gap with these rustic floor pieces. These do a really good job of tying in with the Twilight Pack floor that we've used here. It looks a little bit obvious from above, although we can improve that by changing the colour of the grout and the stones so they match better. But at ground level, you can barely see the join, which is really good. And then we'll move on to one of the most annoying pieces in Planet Zoo, the Arboreal feeding platform. This item used to drive me insane when I first started playing this game. Despite literally having the word Arboreal in its name, i.e. in the trees, you can't place it in trees. If the keepers can't get to it, it can't be used. But whilst that will always be a baffling design decision, it can be used off the floor if you're careful. With this little ramp going up to it, that will enable the keepers to get up onto it and use it, which means the red pandas can use it. And then we're going to use some logs to get the pandas down from the trees onto the feeding platform. This is a really popular design in red panda habitats. I've seen this at Plankendal in Belgium. I've seen it at the Yorkshire Wildlife Park here in the UK. With the red pandas, IRL anyway, spending most of their time up in the trees, creating a pathway for them down to a suspended feeder is a really neat way of getting them down there at feeding time and allowing the guests to see their natural behaviour. So that's what we're replicating here. We're using brackets to attach all the logs to the trees, and we'll do the same thing with this little platform here, which would be the kind of place you might see them sleeping, although I question how much they're going to use it in the game. We shall see. So another bracket on there, and then we'll move back to the overpass and start getting that working. The second most important thing about these overpasses is making sure that whilst the animals can get into them, they can't get onto them. You need to make sure that the animals aren't able to climb onto the outside of them, because then who knows where they'll end up. Normally what zoos do is use a big sheet of glass, perspex, any kind of unclimbable material, and surround the opening with that, so that the animal can't get a purchase on the outside of the tunnel. They can only go into the bit that they're supposed to go into. So we're going to make one here, which again is modelled on the one at Paradisa, and position that over the end of the tunnel so that the only way the pandas can go is into the tunnel. It might look like a bit of an eyesore, but because it's predominantly made from glass, we can tuck this away at the back of the habitat, and it's just going to blend in amongst all the trees and bushes, and it won't really be noticeable. This isn't the final position for the tunnel. I've experimented with a few different places where we could put it, and in the end I decided on the right-hand side of the habitat from the pandas perspective would be the shortest route to get it onto the top of this building here, and through the little access hole we made into their indoor house. With that done, we can build the rest of the overpass. So we're just going to copy this section of it here and get it going up to the top of the house in a natural looking way. Got to be really careful about the meeting point between the logs here. You can't overlap them too much or the climbing won't work. So they've got to be matched up pretty precisely, and then we'll just extend the climbable parts into the building, and then finally add some more logs to the beginnings and the ends of the tunnel to make sure that the pandas can get in and out of it. I've switched the logs for ropes now because they're thinner and less noticeable, and now we can get back to making this habitat look good. So we're going to use a different rock pile here to fill in the front of this, so we can get a sort of semi-cliff effect at the front as well as at the back, and then we'll fill in the ditch with soil and various different little sticks and rocks and things like that to make it look more natural. Fill, as always, the entire habitat with buffalo grass because it looks better than the normal grass. And then we'll attach the beginning of the overpass to the floor with some more logs and some brackets and things like that to get that looking natural. Now, how do you get a habitat with an overpass to work? Let's take a look. The indoor part of the habitat joins onto the indoor of the honey badger habitat. So we're going to take our null barriers from there, run them across the path, making sure they're to the right of the overpass that we've put in. And then we'll run them around the habitat itself. And then at this point, we'll run them back along the path, making sure they're to the left of the overpass so that the overpass is completely contained within these barriers. Then we just need to attach it to the other side of the honey badger habitat, add in a habitat gate, and there we go. You can see outlined in red, that is the functioning overpass habitat. We'll drop some enrichment items and water in here so the pandas have a reason to come in here, and then we'll go and check our heat maps and see if everything is working. And unbelievably, first time it is. That's the overpass working. Before we move on, some baby news. Daisy, our skunk, has had probably the most adorable baby in the zoo. You know the drill by now. I want your name suggestions. What are we going to call this little female baby skunk? Let me know in the comments and we'll get back to the build. There's no point having a beautiful habitat if you don't have beautiful surroundings for it, so we need to get the entrance to the Himalayan Pass finished. What we're going to do is add some more of our Himalayan style flags across the front of the path where the guests will come in from the seal lake that we built last week. And then I thought it would be cool to have some prayer wheels here. That's something you see all over the Himalayas. We don't have any in the game, so we'll make our own. This bell from the base game East Asia set, I realised if we copy this on top of itself, we can get something that looks very close to a prayer wheel, and specifically the really large prayer wheel that sits outside the Himalayan Temple that we are basing this whole area on. Once we've got the actual prayer wheel built, we'll use some other pieces like the metal ropes, I think from the Zookeeper's Animal Pack they came in, to secure the prayer wheel to the base so that people can spin it as they walk past, and the Indian temple piece, which is such a versatile piece. We're going to use that to create a surround and a base for the prayer wheel so it has somewhere to live. So we're going to use one of them upside down as the main kind of structure. We don't need the big kind of very Indian style roof to it. That's not the kind of thing you would see at a temple like this, but we can just use the base of it, and then we'll use another one also upside down as the actual base of the prayer wheel, and then we'll use the same sort of simple corrugated roof that we've used on the other buildings to finish off the top of it, and the load of the smallest faux rocks to finish off the bottom of it. Got ourselves a nice little prayer wheel there, or quite a big prayer wheel really. We'll have two of these, one on either side of the path, so whether people coming from the seal lake are coming from the left-hand path, which avoids the underwater viewing gallery, or the right-hand path through the underwater viewing gallery, they're still going to see it. Time for a sign for the area. So as we've done so many times before, we're going to use one of Ricey's amazing fonts to make a sign for the Himalayan Pass. We'll place that down on this entrance part here. And then we're going to make a pretty simple arrangement for it using some of the East Asian slabs of stone, just arranged in an interesting pattern and precisely positioned so that you can see the font through it. I don't think there's any way to make a zoo look better than using the custom fonts rather than using the two pretty poor fonts that the game comes with. Most of the best of them are made by Ricey or Christina. I would highly recommend going to their workshops and downloading them if you don't have them already. That's the sign completed. And speaking of the workshop, I'm going to drop a couple of workshop items in here. Firstly, because I really want a Red Panda sign on this wall here, and there's just nothing in the game that really works. So I had a quick look on the workshop, and Captain Callum has made a really nice Red Panda sign that looks like it's just been painted on the wall, which is exactly what we want. So we'll put one of those in there. Such an awesome piece. People have done amazing things with art shapes in this game. And then finally, we're going to use this beautiful workshop tree by Romana Palacios, which looks really like the kind of trees that you actually see in this temple, much closer than anything we've got in the game. So I'll place that in there, surround it with some mulch pieces, and that's the build done. Before we take a look at it though, next week something big is happening. On the 5th of November, Planet Zoo will be 6 years old. That means I've been playing this game for almost 5 years, and you guys have been watching me do so for almost as long as that. I just wanted to take the time to say a massive thank you for all your support. Being able to do this full time is absolutely wild, so thank you. Let's take a look at the habitat. Even as we head into winter on a cloudy day, the lighting in this area looks incredible. Let's see if one of our pandas can get from one of their pine trees through their overpass and into their indoor house. It's looking good so far. Straight across that feeding platform, up these logs here, and then into the entrance. There is just something so satisfying about getting this working. In fact, I'm surprised we haven't built more of these. I think this is only the third overpass like this that we've ever built. I remember doing raccoons and the cougar at San Bernardino Zoo. He's almost at the end, up onto the roof of the building and then inside. So what is he going to find inside? Well, that is what we're going to find out next week when we do the interior for this building, with a house for the Red Panda and a house for the Honey Badger, and a beautifully themed Himalayan street for the guests where they're going to have views into both of the indoor houses. This is where the Alpine Mountain Zoo is at now. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Thank you especially to those of you who've joined the Explorers Club. I'll see you next week for some more Planet Zoo. Bye.